Hey, so this is actually the second time filming this because while I was editing, I remember there was some stuff that I wanted to mention and just forgot to the first time around, so here I am recording it a second time. I could have just filmed the pieces that I wanted to and then just slipped them in while I was editing, but I had already put all my setup away, and then my sister was over for a few weeks, and my hair grew longer, and then I also got a new camera, so the visual quality would have been different as well. Eventually it just would have looked too obvious that it was added in after the fact, which like is fine if that's what you want to do, but I don't. I don't know why, I just don't. I don't want to. So, Mamma Mia, here I go again. Time to talk about this video. Are You My Neighbor is the next VeggieTales video, and from the title alone it should be pretty obvious that it's going to try to cover the Christian theme of loving your neighbor and what exactly that might entail. We'll see about that. The first segment is a Seussian-esque retelling of the parable of Jesus the Good Samaritan, a story of a man who is attacked while traveling and passed up by both a priest and a Levite. What I think is really funny about this one is that it's one of the few adaptations of a New Testament story, because co-creator Phil Vischer was told by his mommy that he's not allowed depicting Jesus as a vegetable. Coward. So this follows pretty closely to the original parable, but does change a bit of the biblical context into something that the target demographic is going to understand a little bit easier. They create this kind of whimsical, child-friendly narrative of two towns who argue over eccentric headgear, one of which wears footwear on their head, semi-inspired by Katherine Helmond's character in 1985's Brazil, and the other is just metal cookware a la Moomin's Muddler. And they're just like constantly at each other's throats. Larry's there and a resident of the shoe town, but doesn't concern with any of the fighting stuff, and goes out for a walk one day that takes a drastic turn as he's beaten up by bandits, robbed, and dumped into a hole. Not long after, both the mayor and doctor of Footwear Village come across him in his predicament, but refuse to help out because they're just way too busy, but apparently have just enough time to break into song before getting the hell out of there. And this is just the face I made as a kid when my mom ran into a friend at the grocery store and said she'd just be 5 minutes, but we all know that's not gonna happen. Then along comes Junior, who's from the opposing town, or I guess you could say he's a pothead. I'm sorry, that was really bad. After much humming and hawing, he eventually comes around because he's a sweet boy at heart and gets our friend to a hospital. Things start wrapping up and the mayor declares peace between the two towns because that's a thing within his power apparently. And there's a little message about how you should show kindness to everyone regardless of their sense of fashion, I guess. I don't know, like I know you had to simplify this story for your target audience and aren't going to talk about the tensions between the Jewish people of the first century and the Samaritans, and instead turn it into something about fashion choices. Seems like just a little bit weird to me. I don't know, I think it's just because there are plenty of Good Samaritan adaptations for kids that don't bring up the kind of biblical context for it at all, and instead make it about helping out your fellow man because that's the decent thing to do. And which is what I think the original parable was trying to convey anyways, because Jesus said to love your neighbor and then gave out this parable when asked who qualifies as a neighbor. I don't know, I just think maybe boiling down something that was a very real and serious conflict at the time into something so superficial as headgear is just like a little bit strange. Or trying to tell a story about accepting differences, but in the world you've created, those differences aren't actually present because they're not like different cultures or anything. It's just a hat. Our second segment starts with Junior and Dad trying to figure out who to invite to Junior's upcoming birthday party. His father suggests this new kid named Fernando, but Junior doesn't want to because...
well, he just moved here, so I don't know him very well. And besides, he talks kind of funny.
I think that's just called being racist. But his dad is like, no, that's just a difference, and differences are good, and you should love everyone, regardless of whether they're like you or not. They leave things at that for the night as Junior goes to bed. Or at least, he tries to, because once again, his house gets broken into by Bob and Larry. But this time they're from space, baby! Their spaceship, that I'm not gonna say the name of, because I couldn't say it with a straight face last time I recorded. But it is a food pun, based off the USS Enterprise. The ship is completely without power and in the way of a giant meteor, and for some reason this 6-year-old is the only one who can help them. So they kidnap him, as you do, and take him to their spaceship. Now, I don't really know what particular part of the ship is supposed to be without power, because, like, the elevator works, and so does this clock. Like, I don't get it. If these things have power, shouldn't, like, the rest of the ship? And if not, couldn't you just, like, reroute that power to the engine so that you can move it out of the way? I'm pretty sure that's a thing they do in Star Trek. So we meet Scooter, the ship's engineer, who basically just tells us exactly what we already know. Well, other than that the meteor is made out of popcorn. Don't ask how that works. So, like, I guess he's like kind of useful, but like not really, because you can just look outside and see that for yourself. Just look with your vegetable eyes. Then we meet the Gourds, Jimmy and Jerry, and Junior's like, hey, maybe they can help out. But no. They're the new guys, who apparently don't know anything.
All they do is sing and eat and sing.
Which is a bold claim, coming from someone who just told us something we could have found out ourselves just by looking outside. And also, like, I don't really know what the hiring process is like to have to work on a spaceship like this one, but I'm assuming they had to hand in, like, a cover letter and a resume, maybe a reference page. Definitely would have had to go through a job interview process, right? What I'm trying to say is they have to be more qualified than a 6-year-old, but because one of their only 2 character traits involves snacking, these poor Gourds just get launched into space with, like, no briefing at all, but, like, that's probably okay, because there aren't any unions in space. And yes, this goes exactly where you think it might be going. They eat the fucking meteor. So the danger's gone. The ship is saved, but still without power until someone just plugs a cord in. I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm pretty sure that's not right. But also, I'm not a rocket scientist, so what do I know? Then there's a song segment, which is an absolute bop, and that's the only way I know how to describe music. Junior's returned home, having supposedly learned his lesson, except...
Or maybe if the slime monster shows up and tries to squirt slime all over us, Fernando could maybe blast him with his X-ray eyes.
He doesn't really get it, because he's 6. But he's eventually set on the right course before the show closes off. I understand what this video is trying to do, because a lot of kids' media does the same thing, all to varying degrees of success. You know, they're just trying to tell kids to show love to everyone. And to do that means helping out your fellow man. Or plant in this case. In the first part, they show how just a simple good deed demonstrates neighborly love, and that's a good thing to do, much like the parable it's based on. And honestly, I think they should have just kept it at that without the added Tale of Two Cities scenario. And I think there's something to be said about what's going on in the second segment too, because a lot of kids shows do it, where you have a character who sticks out a little bit, who saves everyone's lives, making everybody change their mind about them. Like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Clifford the Big Red Dog, fucking Spookly the Square Pumpkin. Those 3 also all have their characters be like completely ostracized and bullied. Sometimes unnecessarily cruelly as well.
He's a freak of nature. A mistake.
And I'm not saying I wanted that to happen here, but I am saying that there is like a big difference between being shut out by those around you and just being told that you're a little bit odd. Also, out of those 3 flicks I mentioned, the main characters all have some kind of like physical trait that attracts this negative attention. But in this one, it's just like, they like to sing, I guess, which is pretty tame, honestly. Not to say that people don't get made fun of for behavioral quirks, I know firsthand that it happens, but it's generally for a vastly different reason. Speaking of which, wasn't the initial setup for this segment about Junior not wanting to hang out with a kid from a different country? Because the root of something like that is super not the same thing. Those 2 perceptions stem from vastly different issues and really aren't interchangeable at all. At the very least, his dad brings up that demonstrating love to people should be something that you do regardless of someone's background, and you might learn something from them and gain a better understanding of where they're coming from. But it's kind of just like tacked on at the very end when kids are starting to zone out, kind of like as an afterthought. So like, I don't know, I don't want to say that this is like terrible, because I know what Big Idea was trying to say, but I don't know how well that ended up getting translated to the target audience. Maybe it got through to them really well. I don't know, it's been a long time since I was a kid, so I don't exactly remember. I might just be being too harsh about a show about talking vegetables. I've kind of decided that from here on out, I'm not really going to talk about the animation quality unless there's anything like noteworthy, because I'm just going to start sounding like a broken record, bringing up the same issues each time, and eventually it's just going to get boring and stale. And also, like, as the series progresses, they do get better, they just need a little bit of time getting there. What do you think all these, like, test tubes and dials are doing in the doctor's office? Do you think they do, like, blood tests on vegetables?
Test tubes. Now, what did they use the test tubes for? Would they do blood work on vegetables in Dr. Seuss land?